1999 was memorable for a number of reasons. It was the year in which SpongeBob debuted on Nickelodeon, Barbie celebrated her 40th birthday, and the whole world went nuts because everyone thought the Millennium Bug was real and would cause the collapse of civilization. You don't care about any of that though. You want to hear all about the great video games that were released in 1999. And so we're back once again to remind you of the finest titles that this year had to offer. As is always the case with the best of lists, we must start by establishing the rules. A game can qualify for a spot if it was released in at least one territory in the year in question, and received a minimum of 7 professional reviews. We use Game Rankings and Metacritic to find the creme de la creme of each year, and where those sites have different review scores for the same game, we go with whichever is higher. All of that good and clear? Excellent. I'm Ashton from TripleJump, and here are the 10 best games of 1999. Number 10, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, PC, 92%. They say that space is really, really big, and so, if you were planning on conquering it in real life, it would probably take you ages, and would likely cost a small fortune. If you have neither the patience nor the money to claim other planets as your own, then do not fret, as you can do it digitally for just a fraction of the cost, and in less than half the time. All thanks to Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. Released in February 1999, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri set in the 22nd century, and sees players doing everything they can to become the top dog on the planet Chiron. Gameplay-wise, Alpha Centauri was very similar to Sid Meier's Civilization, in that players were able to build bases, research technology, and assert their dominance over other factions so they might emerge victorious. Like Civilization and Civilization 2, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri went down incredibly well with critics, who praised its science fiction storyline, turn-based gameplay, and fully realised world. Put simply, if you like strategy games and wanted to do said strategy in space, then you could have done a heck of a lot worse than pick up a copy of Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. Number 9, Age of Empires 2, The Age of Kings, PC, 92%. If conquering the galaxy was a bit too big of a task for you, but you still felt the need to conquer something before the turn of the millennium, then Age of Empires 2 The Age of Kings might have been right up your alley. Age of Empires 2 The Age of Kings was a title of the real-time strategy Persuasion, and tasked players with gathering resources, building settlements, and raising armies capable of defeating their opponents. Players could choose from one of 13 different civilizations, and it was up to the player to advance them through the 4 ages, from the Dark Age all the way through to the Imperial Age, with new structures, units, and technologies becoming available as they progressed. By January 2000, just 3 months after Age of Empires 2's release, over 2 million copies of the game had been shipped, and not only did it sell like hotcakes, but it also received a bunch of praise from critics, who lauded everything from the graphics to the historical narrative. Thanks to a 2019 re-release and lockdowns caused by a plague that shall not be named, Age of Empires 2 has enjoyed something of a resurgence in recent years. So I suppose we could also add staying power to its list of virtues as well. Number 8, System Shock 2, PC, 92%. If I had a quid for every time I heard someone complain that System Shock 2 never gets the love it deserves, me and Billy Ray Walrus would have enough money to retire to our own private island. Alas, no one pays me for such things, and whilst I may not be able to rectify the fact that System Shock 2 tends to get overlooked in favour of its spiritual successor BioShock, I can at least sing its praises for the next minute or so. As you might have guessed already, System Shock 2 is the sequel to 1994's System Shock. Set in the year 2114, the game sees players taking on the role of a soldier who must stem the outbreak of a genetic infection aboard a starship. In terms of gameplay, players were treated to a mixture of action-packed first-person shooting, RPG elements, and just a dash of survival horror for good measure. Upon its release in August 1999, System Shock 2 was met with widespread critical acclaim, with reviewers praising its open-ended gameplay in particular. In the years since its release, the game has amassed something of a cult following, and despite poor initial sales, it still has plenty of dedicated fans to this day. Number 7, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, Game Boy Color, 92.63%. Now I know what you're gonna say. Ashton, I thought you don't include ports, re-releases or the like on the best of lists. Under normal circumstances, we wouldn't. But Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color was so much more than just a port. Indeed, Super Mario Bros. Deluxe came with a whole host of features that weren't available in the original 1985 release. Not only did the game allow a brand new generation of players to experience Super Mario Bros. For the first time, but it also came with simultaneous multiplayer, a bunch of graphical upgrades, and stages from Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe went down very well with critics, many of whom gave it a perfect score and praised Nintendo for expanding upon the original title rather than simply porting it to a new console. It also sold incredibly well, shifting almost 3 million copies in the US alone. One critic even went as far to claim it was worth buying a Game Boy Color just to play Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. I'm not sure about that. I mean, who in their right mind would shell out $70 to play one game? Number 6, Homeworld, PC, 93%. Clearly, 1999 was a great time for fans of real-time strategy games, as there were loads of epic offerings available to gamers who enjoyed commanding armies and conquering, well, whatever they could get their hands on. Rounding off our trio of RTS behemoths is Homeworld from Relic Entertainment and Sierra Studios. The game follows the Kushans of Karak, who set out to reclaim their home planet Higara after Karak is destroyed. As one might expect from a strategy title, it's up to players to gather resources, build themselves a fleet, and use it to achieve a wide variety of mission objectives. You name it, Homeworld was praised for it. In particular, critics were impressed by Homeworld's graphics and intricate cutscenes, its atmospheric soundtrack, and overall cinematic feel of the game. There was some criticism levelled at the game's difficulty, and some reviewers found that decisions they had made early on in the run negatively impacted their ability to carry out mission objectives further down the line. As frustrating as this was though, it wasn't a deal breaker, and it didn't stop Homeworld from earning a bunch of different awards, and that all-important Metacritic must-play badge. Number 5, Street Fighter Alpha 3, PlayStation, 93%. Following the success of Street Fighter II in 1991, Capcom decided to take their fighting series in a slightly different direction. So rather than jumping straight into Street Fighter III, they instead bestowed Street Fighter Alpha upon the world. The game was set after the OG Street Fighter, but before Street Fighter II, featured graphics that were more akin to those found in Darkstalkers and X-Men Children of the Atom, and expanded on the super combo system seen in Super Street Fighter II Turbo. The game was well received, and so naturally, sequels followed. The third and final Street Fighter Alpha title was released in arcades and for Japanese PlayStations in 1998, but it didn't make its way to Western shores until the following year. Unlike its predecessors, Street Fighter Alpha 3 got rid of the manual and auto modes, and instead gave players different playing styles, or isms, to choose from. A-ism was similar to the previous Alpha games, X-ism was akin to that found in Super Street Fighter II Turbo, and V-ism allowed players to perform custom combos. This change in approach earned Street Fighter III critical acclaim, with reviewers applauding Capcom for their innovation and calling the game the most playable since Street Fighter II. High praise indeed. Number 4, Gran Turismo 2, PlayStation, 93%. There are 3 things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and that a racing game will appear amongst the 10 best games of any given year. Scientific fact! Probably. Actually, I can't be sure of that, so don't quote me. Though 1999 had its fair share of titles that allowed players to get behind the wheel of various vehicles and zoom around courses to their heart's content, it was Gran Turismo 2 that fared best with critics. Released in December 1999 as a PlayStation exclusive, Gran Turismo 2 plonked players in the driver's seat of numerous different cars, and let them put pedal to the metal in order to beat the computer or their friends. When it came to the actual gameplay, Gran Turismo 2 was very similar to Gran Turismo. The main difference between the two games was that GT2 had a massively expanded selection of cars and tracks, making it endlessly replayable. Regardless of whether you were into cars or not, Gran Turismo 2 was hugely enjoyable. The simulation mode was jam-packed with enough content to keep racing fans occupied for hours, whereas the arcade mode allowed players to jump in and race without any faffing about. It was so fun, even your gran would enjoy it. Get it? Number 3, Unreal Tournament, PC, 93.57%. Oh boy, wasn't 1999 a wonderful year to own a PC? Those of you that have been keeping track will no doubt have noticed that 50% of the entries on this list have been PC releases, so I think the platform deserves a big bravo. According to our research, the very best PC game of 1999 was Unreal Tournament, the first-person arena shooter from Epic Games. The aim of the game was rather simple. Players were plopped into an arena and were tasked with killing their opponents. Several different gameplay modes were available to players, including the likes of Capture the Flag, Deathmatch, and Last Man Standing. Upon its release in 1999, Unreal Tournament was met with universal critical acclaim. Both the single-player and multiplayer modes received tons of praise, and there was nothing but compliments for the game's graphics, level design, and the AI. In fact, just about the only thing reviewers could find to complain about was the beefy system requirements and the music, but neither one of those things was enough to prevent Unreal Tournament from winning the hearts of players, along with a metric flip-ton of Game of the Year awards. Number 2, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, PlayStation, 93.67%. If you've seen any of these best of lists before, then you'll know that at the turn of the millennium at least, Tony Hawk was unstoppable. And you probably won't be surprised that the game that started it all went down so well with critics. Released in September 1999, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater gave players the opportunity to emulate their favourite skaters, but without the risk of breaking any bones. In career mode, players got to select from one of 10 famous skaters, including the Birdman himself, and were then given 2 minutes per level to complete objectives, which included accruing points by performing tricks, collecting letters to spell the word skate, and breaking stuff. If you didn't complete all of the objectives in a set time, there's no need to panic, as any you did achieve were saved, and the rest could be completed in another run. A mechanic which was perfect for folks like our writer, who just isn't very good at games. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater reviewed well on all home platforms, but it was the PlayStation version that triumphed over the rest. In particular, critics enjoyed that the game captured the excitement of skateboarding, combining spot-on physics, tight controls, and impressive graphics into one fun-filled package. And number 1, Soul Calibur, Dreamcast, 98%. According to the good folks over at Metacritic, Soul Calibur is not only the best game of 1999, but it's the 4th best game ever made, and the best fighting title of all time. And if that doesn't deserve a round of applause, I don't know what does. Soul Calibur was originally released in arcades in July 1998, but didn't make its way onto the Sega Dreamcast until a year later. Like its predecessor, Soul Calibur centered around the legendary sword Soul Edge, and the countless warriors that fight to possess or destroy it. In terms of its gameplay, Soul Calibur shared a lot of similarities with Soul Edge, and indeed with other fighting games. Players fought one-on-one against either the computer or a human opponent, and were tasked with gaining the upper hand, and ultimately winning by pulling off combos. Or just by mashing the buttons, we won't judge. Soul Calibur received perfect scores from a vast array of publications, including Famitsu, IGN, and GameSpot, with critics lauding its audio-visual presentation, engaging gameplay, and intriguing characters. In short, it was the very best reason to own a Sega Dreamcast. So, congratulations to you, Soul Calibur. Many fighting games have attempted to replicate your greatness, but none have succeeded. Long may you reign as King of the Fighters.